Welcome to the New York Times Podcast. Your could be Jan 1, sound like July 4th of music, news, and criticism. I'm your host, John Caramonica.
Jam, here comes the man, hot damn. The B-boy stands with an upper hand. Music funky tracks with my man, Michael Jackson. A smooth criminal, half the man is back, so relax. Bingo, jingle in the jungle. Bum rush the door, 3 and 4's in a bundle.
The Mailbag provides. We originally thought it was going to be one episode. It was too many questions. We're stitching it all together. It's episode number 2, 2022, year-end Mailbag. Joe Coscarelli is here. Caryn Ganz is here. Everybody locked in. At the top, you were listening to Jam. That's Michael Jackson and Heavy D. You will understand why we are playing that song momentarily when we get to the questions. But before we get into it, this is the final episode of 2022. We have had a phenomenal year. Everybody has really showed out. We had our first live event. We have our first t-shirt. It's the popcast.myshopify.com. If you don't have one, come get one. I'll write you a little note. I'll pack it. I'll walk it over to the post office. A lot has happened this year, and next year is only going to be bigger and better. At the end of every year, I like to shine a light on everybody who has taken their time to be on Popcast and who I'm grateful for their knowledge, expertise, wisdom, and general good cheer. So let me just quickly run through the 2022 roll call because there's some heaters on here. Okay, so we're taking the list alphabetically. There's no judgments attached to the order here. Just very simply, they came, they saw, they kicked ass. So we're going to kick off Jerry Barrow, OG. Happy to have you, Jerry. Tom Bryan, Cop Tom's book that came out a couple months ago. Ryan Broderick, great newsletter. Rachel Brodsky, great pop writer. Lawrence Burney, Lawrence's Magazine. Justin Charity, maybe go send Justin Charity an email because he remains off of social media, or at least off of Twitter, perhaps wisely. Hazel Sills, Naima Cochran, Monka Bercante, John Dolan. What a legend. John Dolan was here. David Drake, the original Chief Keef Whisperer, Shad D'Souza, Catalina Eccleston. Go check out Catalina's reggaeton history site. Jason P. Frank, fresh out of college, if I'm not mistaken. Is that our youngest guest this year? Who can say? Ming Garvey, Andre G. Just moved to L.A. Check in with Andre if you're in L.A. Michael A. Gonzalez, a true OG. Ariel Gordon, Andy Green, Heaven Haile, Petter Holland, all the way from Sweden. Hunter Harris, obviously the newsletter queen. Rob Harvilla, my true heart. I palpitate for you, Rob. Isabella Herrera, Julie Height, Hua Su. Go buy Hua's book, Stay True, or come and buy our stuff when we have our inevitable 2023 ephemera pop-up. Jeffy Haza, Tim Ingham, Craig Jenkins, E. Alex Jung, Stephen Kierce, Madison Malone Kircher, Maureen Mahan, Rob Markman, Alex Marshall, Soraya Nadia McDonald, Kiana Mickles, braving the beehive to be here. A pleasure. Marcus Moore, Quinn Moreland, Joan Morgan, again, true OG. Go buy all of Joan's books. Wesley Morris, obviously. Alana Nash, Joseph Patel, one of my personal best friends. Larisha Paul, Nick Qua, William Robin, coming through on that Richard Taruskin wave. Peter Rosenberg, squashing the beef. Who knows if it was beef, but we squashed it this year. Peter Rosenberg on Popcast. Gio Rusinello, obviously. Chris Ryan, another one of my hearts. Patrick Sandberg, Liana Satinstein, A.O. Scott, Grady Smith, check his YouTube out, Sam Sadomsky, Caitlin Tiffany, Salamisha Tillett, Pulitzer Prize winner Salamisha Tillett, I should add, Oliver Wang, one of my dear old friends, Allison Wilmore, Zachary Wolf, and Kat Zhang to round it out, who someone for the Mailbag episode simply sent an email just expressing they thought Kat Zhang was cool. Kat, you're cool, and you came on Popcast, so really no complaints there. Finally, of course, the core crew, Joe Coscarelli, Caryn Ganz, the legend John Perellis, Ben Cesario, Lindsay Zolad's new addition to the team. And it's an incomplete roll call without pulling Pedro Rosado from Headstepper Media out of the back of the episode and putting him in the front of the episode. Pedro, you want to pop in and say something real fast?
Something.
Yeah, thanks. That's extremely helpful. Pedro's laid up with a flu of indeterminate origin.
I'm dying here.
He's indeterminate origin, and yet still we thug it out in the quiet week between Christmas and New Year's. Pedro, you have been indefatigable this year.
I don't know what that means, but I guess it's good.
I'm not actually going to tell you if it's good or bad. You're just gonna have to hold that. Regardless, whatever it is, you're gonna have to hold it.
Don't use big words like delicatessen and acclimate.
More Big Ting 2023. You didn't get enough mailbag? We didn't get enough mailbag. Nobody got enough mailbag. More mailbag for the 9-9 and the 2-2 and the 2-3. Caryn Ganz is here.
Still here.
Joe Coscarelli is here.
I love the mailbag. I really love the mailbag.
It's literally, like, truly, like, you could be in Uzbekistan. You could be in Kenya. You could be in Ecuador. And if the mailbag bat signal goes out, it's the mailbag light
We're
in
here.
the sky, 100%.
The questions are too good.
They really are.
We couldn't be more thrilled with the questions, and we're just going to dive right back in. Another question from Gabe Gill. Gabe says, it feels like the era of the pop/rap crossover collab is dwindling. Purely rap records are successful on their own terms, true, and mainstream pop feels like it is calibrated back towards a less hip-hop inflected style. Dua Lipa, also true. The promising rap up-and-comers seem uninterested in compromising their sound, but do you think we could see, say, a Sofago x Sam Smith song this year? No. The answer to that is no. Okay, I have some thoughts about the premise of the question. I understand the logic of the question, which is like there is an era certainly dating back even to the 90s, but really to the 2000s of like very gratuitous, like we are going to jam a rap verse into a pre-existing pop song. Or alternately, later, we are going to import a pop singer into a rap song. And that goes all the way up to like Dua Lipa and DaBaby or whatever.
Right. DaBaby killed the rap collab.
It really did. It really did.
They were like, never mind, no more.
Is that why he's not selling out Irving Plaza? Is that what's happening? Anyway, sidebar. So I do think that idea, you're right, is lightly outmoded. Now, there is a little wrinkle in that, which is, of course, the Drake and the post-Drake ecosystem. And that happens because a lot of the aesthetic touch points of collaborations like that are now often embodied in one person. You do not need to import someone to do melody. You do not need to import someone to do hook structure. The main person, whether that person is labeled or categorized as a rapper or a singer, often does all of those things. And so the songs, I think, have, dare I say, the familiar structure of a pop rap collaboration, but they are not collaborative. They are single person serving songs. So I think that is part of what you're seeing. You're right in the sense that like younger artists a la Yeat are not that interested in compromising their sound. Now, that said, if like Ed Sheeran came calling, maybe there'd be an Ed Sheeran Yeat record. Who knows? Someone like that who is like famously open-eared and collaborates widely and also is like pretty malleable on their own. Maybe there's some kind of middle point. Joe, what do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. You think of someone like Lil Baby, one of the biggest rappers of the last few years, has not really done the pop crossover route, but did do a record with Ed Sheeran, like you mentioned, which I think was not successful domestically, but was more of an international play. So that's interesting.
Like those French Montana records that are like hits in Belgium or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. You think of over the last few years, whether it's Harlow on Industry Baby with Lil Nas X, going back a bit, Thug on Camila Cabello, Havana, which I think
vomit emoji,
but which I think like really did give him like another shot at a weird crossover phase in his career and led to #1 albums like Punk and all of that before whatever else has gone on with Young Thug, which is not for this episode. So I think you've seen them in waves, and that Dua Lipa DaBaby one that we alluded to was obviously huge before DaBaby blew up his own career with various real life choices. But the industry is not very creative. And speaking once again about this dearth of stars, I think we will see it more probably next year because they're going to think what the major labels are going to think, how do we make these people pop? And often the answer is combining two fan bases on streaming services by making features. So
appearing under two search terms.
The hurdle to that is that trap, which for the last 5 or 10 years was like a default mode of what songs should sound like, even in pop music. Katy Perry with Juicy J, Ariana Grande aping Soulja Boy and 2 Chainz. That is not the case anymore. Like I have been known to say that Harry Styles succeeds in large part on the basis of his whiteness. And like you cannot shoehorn a rapper onto that Harry Styles album.
I actually think SoFago would sound great on that Harry Styles record. True, like if ever there was a pop record for SoFago to get on, it would not be Sam Smith.
Yeah. So I think it depends on who the pop stars are that are popping, but I think you're going to see more of these collaborations forced together in search of more stardom and hit records.
I think that that is how things often have been, but I do think the part of the question that this generation generally doesn't need or even particularly crave that. I do believe that. Like you mentioned Lil Baby, I'm thinking about Kodak. Has Kodak done like big pop collaborations?
Kodak comes with a lot of baggage.
Of course, but baggage is everywhere. Let's say the post-Future, post-Thug wave of truly big rap stars, like standalone rap stars, that generation just doesn't seem terribly interested in this proposition. And I think if there is a golden age of that idea, I think it is a lot of label people basically being like, hey, buddy, you're big in the rap scene, but what if we can get you big in the pop scene? You know, it's a lot of that. Whereas now, that's what pop is. Pop is already that.
Those proposals will continue to exist because you're going to have somebody like or SoFago or whoever it is, and they're going to feel like they hit a ceiling on their career, and some executive or A&R or whatever manager is going to sit down with them and say, yeah, you're big now, but like you want to sell out an arena, like you need a smash with Dua Lipa.
Okay. I'm so glad you mentioned Dua Lipa because we have Dua Lipa question.
What?
Yeah, that's the question.
This was not Dua's year.
No, Bianca Davino wants to know, does Dua Lipa have stans? She is obviously a huge artist, but being as chronically online as I am, I see zero pandemonium.
Yeah, you know who Dua Lipa's stans are? Straight men.
Wow.
Reply, guys.
Yeah, reply, guys. Zero pandemonium. Yeah, in traditional fan spaces, shout out Tumblr, shout out the meme ecosystem. The only good Dua online content I've ever seen is Jeremy O'Hara saying, give us nothing, rhythmless icon about Dua Lipa. Go ahead, give us nothing, rhythmless icon. I've never seen good Dua Lipa content on the internet otherwise. So Bianca says, I see zero pandemonium line, and the general conversation around her doesn't extend beyond the consensus that she has put out multiple bops, which leads to my second question. Does Dua have the potential to go from popular pop singer to pop superstar? This very much lines up with something that I have thought about Dua Lipa quite a bit, which is that Dua Lipa is not a fully formed product. Dua Lipa is a collection of songs that deploy familiar strategies in a generally appealing package altogether.
That is totally right.
Well put.
I'm sorry, just like relate, like just
well,
like
no, you're 100% right.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to frame this well because I do think that those same songs coming from a different person, like let's say even like a Charlie XCX, those same songs wouldn't have hit quite the same way. I do think the presentation matters in this case, but I don't think that it has all added up to like a standalone, fully formed pop superstar personality. This came up, Karen, when we went to the show. Was that earlier? That was like at the beginning of the year, right?
I think it was March.
Yeah, it was just before I went on leave. So it was right. It was a baffling show.
It was a bad show.
But it was also baffling because I was like, 80% of these songs are absolute, undeniable bangers. It's not no skips, but it's very few skips in the track listing of the performance. And yet there is nothing happening in this room at all. Like we are listening to the radio, watching a talent show. That's what's happening here. That's how it felt. And I don't know what it's going to take to scale that.
I don't know if you can like weld a persona onto a pop star at this stage of their career. John did a spit take.
I'm doing the thing with the welder where you like pull the mask down. Like this is how I feel. It's like I'm doing this.
No, it really is perplexing because I mean, I did that story in 2020 when her album came out. I thought she was really smart. She was funny. She has like internal personality. I think she's a talented songwriter. I think she is an okay performer. That would be an area where we need to work. But regardless of that, she doesn't inspire the kind of pandemonium. Is someone making noises or is it just me?
John's squealing.
I'm in
okay.
I'm in breach.
He's welding.
Are you welding? Okay. I thought something was being birthed. She doesn't have the persona around it that would inspire pandemonium.
Yeah, there's no friction.
Yeah, there's no friction. There isn't really that it factor other than she looks fantastic.
Look, like that's the elephant in the room is like Dua Lipa has songs and she's incredibly beautiful and posts a dozen photos of herself every single day and never runs out of photos
Is
in
that
which she
true?
looks
Does she
hot.
post that many photos?
I had to unfollow
No.
John.
This is a big thing of mine. I tweeted probably more than a year ago that eventually Dua Lipa is going to run out of photo dumps, and yet she never runs out of photo dumps. But I think she exists in two dimensions for a lot of people.
Caryn, to your point about welding a personality onto, like, let's be generous here, right? Could a personality emerge out of this? One of the things,
because like Caryn said, she's bright.
that's what I will say. Like, evidently, there's a lot going on with Dua Lipa. Why has the stuff that's going on that, frankly, is not going on with a lot of her pop star counterparts? Why is that stuff that is interesting not bubbling to the surface, not creating like a parallel ecosystem of interest? I just said that for the fourth damn time. I am tired.
You know, I know I'm remembering now that when I interviewed her and she had just gone on Instagram Live crying to be like, I have to postpone the album. And then it got leaked and she had to release it immediately. She had said to me, I'm so uncomfortable with social media. The last time I went on live, I like drank a glass of champagne and like snorted it through my nose. It was when she had won a Grammy. She is not a master of social media other than these photos.
She has a whole
and I think
website.
that actually,
she has like a whole like.
She has no. It's a newsletter.
Okay,
She is a
wait.
she
Quick,
is
pop quiz. What is Dua Lipa's newsletter site called?
Newsletter 95.
No,
right?
Yeah,
is
Something like that.
That's not
it's
true.
something like that.
I think it is.
That's not
I think
true.
it is. And we're not
she
even
has a
going to look it up. We're
podcast.
just going to keep it rolling.
Listen, she is Goop-esque in that she has a little bit of like a lifestyle empire that she's building on the side. There's a podcast and there's a newsletter about travel.
Me too, girl.
But a lot of this is Charlie can say one thing in a tweet and it's hilarious or it's devastating or whatever. And that's not Dua's forte. And I think that actually is an issue here because that is where most of the myth making happens.
Here's my theory. Dua Lipa, too hot for stans.
Wow.
You don't think Ariana's hot? She's got stans.
Ariana has a lot of friction. You know what I mean? Like we were
Exactly,
talking about,
yes.
like she has a lot of narrative. Dua Lipa has almost no narrative. This is where you end up. You end up on page 6 with Jack Harlow.
First of all, a
Ooh.
place that a lot of people would like to be. I just want to, just as a sidebar, just putting
I
that
love
out
that we're all
there.
just defending the people that we've profiled.
Yes. But also to the Ariana question, let's think about the nature of standom, right? This is a bigger question about stands. Ariana has stands, incredibly high vibration, right? But part of that is because Ariana has been famous since she was 12 or 13. People really feel like they grew up with her. Dua Lipa's stardom, quote unquote, and the success of her music, I want to say it's actually a very old-fashioned success story. The songs are really good, but the songs are perhaps so good and so seamless and so frictionless that there is almost no need to question what's behind them. They feel like Dua Lipa hits really genuinely feel like old pop hits. And that's not something
She's
that
an
a lot of-
old-fashioned pop star.
very old-fashioned.
all
Yes,
around.
And because of that, it doesn't open the question of what's underneath the songs. The sentiments are not overly specific, a la Taylor Swift. The production is not particularly inventive. So you never think like, who's this wild mind with this crazy production idea? That's not what's happening. What's happening is you're being delivered a soothing, updated version of a thing that you have loved time and time again. Or if you're arriving at it for the first time, this will be the type of song that people will be ripping off 10 to 20 to 30 years from now. And it in and of itself is a ripoff of things from 10 or 20 or 30 years ago. Because of that kind of timelessness and placelessness and spacelessness, there isn't a lot of room for a personality to come out.
I was joking when I said too hot for stands, but that's what I meant. It's like everything is too smooth for her. Like standoms come in part because people feel like they need to protect the artist that they love.
Right. Rush to their defense.
Yeah, like everything has gone Dua Lipa's way, which is why you see much more active standom for like a Charlie who has had a lot of bumps in her career and who people feel is underappreciated.
All
Or
bumps.
even like a Caroline Polachek, where people are like, this is so, forgive me, like this is so mid that I'm going to go down and die for this. You know what I mean? Like,
First of all, mid is generous. Mid's generous. That's the kindest thing that's been said about that artist on this show.
But you know what I mean, right? Like people want to fight and they want to feel invested in the struggles and overcoming of an
And
artist.
also like lining up the struggles of the artist with like personal struggle. And I do think like you see this in K-pop standom a lot. Like when there is even like the tiniest flicker of like emotional complication, people will be like, oh, he do be me for real. It's a lot of that. Whereas the Dua songs and the Dua presentation are so seamless, so polished that there is no like, what do you call it in rock climbing? There's no like crevasse. There's no crevice to like really.
That's what you call it in rock climbing, John?
Yeah, you know, when I just go down to the
I
rock
don't know.
climbing class, when I just pop over to the rock climbing gym, you know how it is. You know how I get down. You know, there's literally no crevice to like put your fingers on and really not just hold on to, but like hold tight to. It's just not there.
I don't think it has so much to do with the songs than with her persona, though. I disagree with what you're saying about the music being so shiny that there's no room for that.
It's true that they're not personal, though. Ariana, people are really grafting the tabloid narrative onto it and wanting to parse. Like, Dua's songs are very much not confessional.
Or maybe they are, but they're presented in a way. It's weird. I'm surprised to hear you say that the songs aren't that smooth, because I feel like we may find out 10 years from now that all these songs are the most intimate. They're all about Anwar Hadid, you know, like who knows? But to me, it's this stitched tightness of the production that makes it hard to even have those conversations.
Yeah, I do see that point, but like the first volley of Lady Gaga, aesthetically, very close to this album, that last album, Future Nostalgia, just very, very tightly wound disco. She obviously didn't have an issue with that because she came out as all persona at that time.
Doing the most.
But Gaga was messy on the outside, whereas Dua is smooth and seamless 360 degrees.
I agree with this, yes.
And I think like her only struggle, like her career has gone, frankly, like pretty perfectly. Her struggle was the thing that you wrote about, which was the pandemic release of her, what was supposed to be her blockbuster album. But the problem was everybody was going through that same struggle together. So it wasn't hers alone to own.
I actually reject that. I don't think that was a struggle, but that's a totally separate conversation.
Well, I mean, look, it sucks when like your world-beating album comes out, or your world-beating dance floor album comes out in the middle of a global pandemic.
It sucks when the dance floor albums that people made came out in 2022, not 2020, I guess is maybe one way to think about it. I'm glad we're talking about Dua because there were a lot of questions about pop girls. And I actually want to cluster a few questions together because they think they're all touching on the same thing. Raynell Cooper says, Rina Sawayama sounds like someone earnestly trying to forge a path towards pop superstardom. What does that path look like for her or anyone else in 2022, 2023? Ryan Maroney says there have been a few artists trying to have a, quote, main pop girl moment this year. Think Charlie XCX and Rina Sawayama, but they haven't entered the ultra mainstream. Ace of Cups 710 in the Discord said, I need to know what the Roundtable of Popcast thinks of Kim Petras in light of her receiving a Grammy nomination for her recent collab with Sam Smith, Unholy. Love you guys and hope you are all healthy this flu season. Yeah, we didn't get that. J.H. Chancellor in the Discord says, okay, so Maggie Rogers and Carly Rae Jepsen, remember Carly Rae Jepsen? Both released albums on the same day as much bigger artists. What do you think of those albums and how does being overshadowed to that extent affect their careers going forward? And one last one that's sort of not the same thing, but it's adjacent. Garrett Clayman, what's up, Garrett, says, I know you're begging to talk Lauren Spencer Smith. Boy, am I. I even watched her season of Idol, and I don't get how she had such a breakthrough year and where the momentum came from. I feel like there is a trend of these Olivia-esque girls building solid footing on pop radio and streaming, and curious where you see LSS going and the fate of some of her contemporaries. Okay, Dua Lipa, as close as we have to a basic big tent pop star, not like excluding Olivia. Like who Olivia, I think, functions in a few different spaces. Dua Lipa functions like a very narrow space. Here you have a number of ascendant Aravistes. You have people who are trying to do like a lightly ironic version of like what a Dua Lipa is doing. Is there any room at the highest level for that kind of approach? Karen, what do you think?
Oh, yeah. There's plenty of room.
But none of these people who we're talking about now are really hitting at that level.
I'm going to sound like a broken record. I just don't think the albums were there and the songs weren't there. Of everybody that was mentioned, I thought the Maggie Rogers album was the strongest. And no offense, I thought the Carly Rae Jepsen one was the weakest. I'm trying to think who else was mentioned.
Kim Petras, Charlie XCX, Rina Sawayama. 2 questions about Rina. Talk about Charlie. Someone emailed and said, like, when I was away, you like snuck in a Charlie episode. As if I didn't know that you were going to do a Charlie episode.
Someone was snitching on Karen for a Charlie episode.
Yeah, and also
as if we're not family.
Yeah, like as if
That's
the
really
group chat
funny.
is not jumping at all hours of all days. Obviously, I knew there was a Charlie episode, and I also felt completely at peace not participating in it.
I listened to the Charlie album so much to prepare for that podcast that it showed up on my Spotify on Wrapped in like a ridiculous position. And I was like, I haven't listened to it that much in like 10 months. It was crazy.
Over-indexing for work.
Wow.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. I think the Charlie album is actually great and that it did age well over the course of the year. And it's probably her strongest major label release, which I think we ended up saying on the podcast in the end. Whether or not she becomes like a bigger global full-fledged pop star really has to do with her personality and her decision-making about what she will and will not do to compromise. Obviously, there's tons of compromise on the road to stardom. I think she very famously doesn't compromise. And she likes to make weird hyper-pop albums or mixtapes in between things. So, I mean, I think there are reasons why she isn't bigger. Rena, I think the album was designed to take her into the next level, and it just didn't happen. It didn't click. And I think it's because it wasn't an amazing album. I thought it was okay.
You know, I'm a huge fan of the prior Rena album, which was on my year-end list in 2019 or 2020. I can't remember whenever that was. But the thing that's so fascinating about that prior Rena album is it's taking like widely accepted, successful pop music tropes and like tweaking them. I can be an eccentric, I can be unusual, I can have unconventional songwriting material and put it in this house that you all know what this house looks like, but I'm going to fill this house with something else. And this album, to me, felt like the risks of like the houses was not as strong, and also the songwriting was not as unexpected. And so at a certain point, then you are kind of just playing the same game as Dua Lipa, and like you have to be really good at it to play at that level. And it's possible that for Rena to have true success, the friction that was on the prior record is really the thing that set her apart. To me, maybe that's the path forward for Rena. Charlie, I feel like depending on which email I'm reading or which tweet I'm reading, Charlie is either like a pure pop genius that should be like the most famous person on the planet, or the most experimental dismantler of pop hierarchies that we have. No and no. Like genuinely no and no.
But I think these women have invented, and some men in this space also, even like a Frank Ocean. Like, I think there is a new tier, and it is crystallized over the last decade. No. Alt pop stars, niche pop stars.
Yeah, sure.
I agree.
Tyler, the Creator, Lana Del Rey,
Carly Rae
whatever
Jepsen.
Lord wants to be now. See, Carly, I think is slightly different, because Carly, I think, has always been trying to be a down the center pop star, but never quite made it, and hasn't accepted her fate to live on this other tier.
Because there's a fandom of, apologize, of gay men keeping her.
We're pushing her, somewhere she doesn't belong.
She's in the Matrix. Go on.
Yeah, but I think you're right. Without a surefire smash record, these people will live as niche album artists who can still have extremely lucrative, extremely beloved careers. This is the path that I saw like Ethel Cain taking. Florence is another good example. Florence has never matched the heights of Dog Days Are Over, and probably never will, but has an amazing, extremely established career. And I think that increasingly, I hope these artists will realize that that is a way to be, in the way that Lana did, and make the records they want to make, play to the people they want to play for, and not sacrifice to try to have a crossover hit.
1000% agree. Also pointing out Florence sold out 2 nights at MSG on this tour.
That's what I'm saying. Many albums removed from her most commercial successes.
Joe, this was last year, I think. I texted you when I was going stealthily to those Morgan Wallen shows for that piece. And I was like, you'll never guess who's playing here like next week at this arena. Like, like an arena, 15,000, 16,000. And it was Trippie Redd. right? And I just like, there's no universe in which I could conceptualize Trippie Redd selling out a 15,000 seat arena, but it is a very important reminder that there are people in all genres having robust mid to high level careers, and that is absolutely fine if you do not approach the pop mainstream. The interesting question for people like Rena and Charlie is this constant debate about why is the pop mainstream not embraced? Like, no one is having the conversation. Why is the pop mainstream not approaching Trippie Redd? No one's having that
Yeah,
conversation.
right.
Right? And certainly no one in Trippie Redd's universe is worried about that. So why are people in these universes worried about that?
Because they are playing with the trappings of the traditional pop star and divas and stan communities, because that is so much a part of their lexicon, both musically and extracurricularly, that I think people get confused about where they should be.
Wow. You said people are confused.
I think
Sick
you're right.
bird.
That's a great point,
Sick
Joe.
bird.
Yep.
Y'all really do be confused. That's the title of the Popcast spinoff show.
They might not know what they want. Even a Mitski, like you've seen, she's more popular than you probably ever could imagine that she would be when she was putting out albums on Bandcamp. And she's conflicted about that. And the music is also conflicted about that. And I think that like that's an interesting space for these artists to be in. I think we have to stop thinking that only a Billboard top 10 hit is like a successful career, because it's just not true.
Kim Petras. What do we think of Kim Petras? I think the Sam Smith record doesn't feel like a good Kim Petras record. It's like a whatever song. It doesn't move me really, but it doesn't feel like a Kim Petras. Like the Kim Petras hits are interesting. They're strange. They're weird. This Sam Smith collaboration is like not a good Kim Petras song, I don't think.
I think she's going to take one more swing at trying to be a down the middle pop star. If you look at the way her career has built up to this point, I still think it's, I want to go number one in the draft or bust. She's not trying to play in the minor leagues. And she might end up having to be a Charlie instead of a Dua, but I think she's going to take one more shot.
Caryn?
When you're saying that her most interesting stuff, are you referring to the stuff she made with Dr. Luke?
I am referring to the stuff that she made with Dr. Luke. My apologies. The way that it played with like formal pop structure was, to me, you know, like sort of these challenged and challenging references to like early 2000s Britney and so on and so forth, like that. I think Kim was kind of like maybe the first person to really be doing those kind of records. I feel like you see it a little bit more.
But I hear that in Unholy.
As much?
Like a more straightforward version.
Yeah, it feels like an accent. It doesn't feel signature to me. I found it boring to listen to.
I mean, regardless of what you think about Dr. Luke outside of the recording studio, he still is extremely adept at creating hits. You know, we've seen him showing up at the past few Grammys if on the ballot, if not in person. So, I mean, nothing says to me more, you know, I'm really taking the swing and trying to be a pop star than partnering with him. So I would imagine, you know, I haven't heard that perfect Kim Petras record yet, but I would imagine, you know, if she continues on this trajectory, we might get something very interesting next year or the year after. Who knows?
And to quickly touch on the Lauren Spencer Smith question, there are two intersecting themes that created the opportunity for someone like Lauren Spencer Smith. One is obviously post Olivia Rodrigo and also the absence of Olivia Rodrigo, to get back to something that we were talking about earlier. It does leave room for someone like Lauren Spencer Smith, who I think is like a very good singer and like a deeply emotionally heartrending songwriter. But also the TikTok sads, right? Like the Katie Gregson McLeod energy, like the notion that for a certain segment of TikTok users, having a persistent soundtrack for sadness has been really viable as a strategy this year. And I think the success of Lauren Spencer Smith in the last, let's say 12 months, dipping back to last year, I think, has been really reflective of TikTok's voracious appetite for this kind of mood. And I think that's something that I don't know if it'll last. It felt to me like as much of a trend, quote unquote, as like dance records and TikTok in 2019 and 2020.
Where does the Grammy nominated artist Gayle fit into this?
Never heard of her.
Okay.
I don't know. Caryn, what do you think of Gayle?
I don't have a strong Gayle take yet, which I think is probably the right perspective. I don't think Gayle is.
We're wait and see on Gayle.
That's all I got on Gayle at the moment.
Yeah, I need there to be a 2.0 note on Gayle. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. It brings me no joy to play this song. Set your TikTok comments. It's ABCDEFU. It's Gayle, Grammy nominated. Head scratch, shrug emoji. We're back. Joe's here. Caryn's here. Mailbag episode 2. We're on it. Let's go. We had a couple of Gex questions, but obviously I know there's going to be Gex stuff coming down the line.
Gex in the pipeline.
Yeah, so like we'll come back. Xavier Vecchia says, any thoughts on recent hyperpop trends? Was thinking about this with the MGK episode as well. Kind of curious how revitalized interest in pop punk might influence hyperpop and vice versa. So I think Xavier is right to identify a kind of common urge in these two worlds. Also, Glaive 2023, I'm ready. Let's go. I couldn't be more ready. Do you see hyperpop coalescing into something more formalized like pop punk? Especially because there is so much pop punk energy right now, and people like MGK are like vampirically plucking people and ideas. Do we see those scenes coming together?
I feel like they're spreading apart. They're atomizing even more in these niche sub genres. I've been really fascinated to follow people who pay much closer attention to this than I do. You know, some Nobels I mentioned. Like, I think there are people really covering this world well. Kieran Press Reynolds, a young music writer who freelanced for us once. The year-end list on his newsletter has been really great, diving into the way these little tributaries have shot off. And I feel like I can't really get my mind around it because I don't live in these Discord, TikTok spaces where it's really flourishing. You know, there are even new platforms, I think, that are rising to suit the need for all of this. I don't know if the promise of hyperpop from 2019, in that it's like going to take over the mainstream, is coming to fruition, but I think it's having maybe even more of an interesting path.
We talked briefly about SoundCloud earlier and how SoundCloud matured and developed. And I think maybe me being a little bit older, a longer view of how some of these smaller scenes would grow. I mean, you think about grunge or whatever and like the slow expansion, but ultimate like widespread takeover of a sound like that. And like that, in my mind, at least, is still kind of a model, but things do move so fast and people are so parasitic and like really are stripping for parts, like new ideas and younger artists. So it's like you don't necessarily have the option to lightly, or rather in silence or like in a corner, develop your scene. Nobody notices. You have a collection of producers, singers, rappers, whatever, that are developing and growing in total isolation. That doesn't happen that much anymore. Like, I'm even struck with drill. There's drill popping up in unlikely places. There's Jersey Club popping up in K-pop records. Like, the minute it gets put out, it's getting stripped for parts. Maybe the reason that SoundCloud never became what I thought it could be when Peep was alive, or the reason that hyperpop is re-atomizing, if that's what you're saying, Joe, is because it's a defense mechanism.
I'm interested though, like, you seemed bullish on the scene, especially a couple years ago, but like, I don't think there was a lot of hyperpop on your year-end list, and you didn't cover a lot of the sort of little stuff bubbling up this year. Like, or were you turned off by the sounds?
No, it wasn't like a turn-off thing, but I felt like the shock and the new had worn off. That's part of it. And I think sometimes the big innovation is often the first innovation. And that's not to say that a 3.0 or a 4.0 version of a scene can't do that. But a 1.0 innovation is in reaction to a big meta problem. It's like, we don't see ourselves represented anywhere in this whole thing. We're going to completely shift. The 2.0 and 3.0 innovations are in reaction to the 1.0 innovation. And those can be smaller and more precise and more insular. And it doesn't mean it doesn't make for great or interesting music, but it may be a little less transparent of a read.
You're talking like early Gex, early Glaive, early Quinn.
Exactly. Whereas the later stuff, it feels like it's a combination refining of / reaction to the early stuff. It's like when we ran that feature that Ben Dandridge Lemko wrote about like the formalization of hyperpop, like through the lens of the hyperpop playlist. It's like you're telling a bunch of people who maybe didn't know that they were making common music, and maybe even weren't making common music among them, that they are. And then all of a sudden you have to reckon with that when you wake up in the morning. You have to think of yourself. I mean, you don't have to, but most likely, you know, it's like you're humans, like you're susceptible.
Yeah, you've been saddled with a label.
And that's, I think, the post-label saddling stuff has not been as exciting as the pre-label saddling stuff.
But you agree with me that even though it might be tough to find the center, there is a lot of interesting music being made and writing about that music. Like also someone like H.D. Angel, who wrote a recent review on Pitchfork, sort of boiling this all down.
What was that, the Break-Ins record?
The Break-Ins, yeah, Hypochondriac review, I thought was a really nice sort of summation of where we're at least one slice of that.
We should have a Kieran H.D. Angel episode for that scene.
Yeah, for sure.
2023. We'll get on that.
Maybe it's related to the Gex.
Oh, yeah. No, that's true. That's actually, no, we'll definitely do that. Okay. There are a lot of country music questions, but maybe it's just going to be me talking for 6 minutes. So I guess we'll find out. Okay. Haley Sue Evans wants to know, with country music at a crossroads, do we say this every year? Yes. What does the popular path for up-and-comers look like? We've seen so many young country artists looking backwards, drawing much of their inspiration from 90s artists, lots of red dirt and outlaw country being put out, a la Zach Bryan. Do we think country is turning back the wheels of time pre-bro era? What are the patterns you're seeing, or are these random, or do I just live in Fort Worth, Texas? A great town.
Wow.
Great town.
Good question.
Okay. Michael DeCaro also in a question about Florida-Georgia line, which we will not talk about Florida-Georgia line. My apologies. Talking about how the country gentleman took the country bro out back and put him down. Damn. I hope that no one gets arrested for that crime. So let's talk a little bit about Zach Bryan and also Bailey Zimmerman, who is someone who I like to talk about. One thing that country obviously has always struggled with, and this is a Nashville problem, is, Joe, is there a term for like the arc of time over which an album is worked? Is there like an industry term for that?
Cycle?
Yeah, the album cycle.
Like the cycle that like a hip hop album
Karen.
is worked is like 36 days.
I thought you were going to say 36 hours.
minutes.
Yeah. You just drop 3 videos and then never think about it.
It literally
again.
never existed. And then 2 months later, if something happens to pick up on TikTok, you'd be like, oh, damn, we got to go back and work that now. Country album windows are so huge. And obviously, this is a marketing question. This is a radio question. Country radio obviously is much more of a bottleneck. It really does throttle innovation. It's a real big problem. Now, as young artists in other genres have learned how to go around those systems and then make those systems answerable to them, you listen to Z100 right now or a pop station in any major American city, and you're really just hearing records that are popular on TikTok. Now, some of those are label-contrived records. Some of those are organic breakthrough records, but it doesn't really matter. The star-making or taste-making system has completely changed in those genres. Country was incredibly slow to arrive at that. It is striking that the 2 major breakouts of 2022, Zach Bryan, who may or may not be a country star, that's a separate conversation, which we've had on podcast, but Zach Bryan was an internet breakout on Twitter, of all places. I mean, I guess it is fitting that there would be a country breakthrough on the most country-like social media platform, which is Twitter.
And also on YouTube, right? Was that
yes,
where
the initial breakthrough was Twitter, and then eventually he had a big YouTube presence, then leaned into that. And Bailey Zimmerman is a TikTok breakout. Priscilla Block, who I wrote about, also was a TikTok breakout. There are people who have found ways to bridge that. And Priscilla has found her way onto radio, which also we've talked about on podcast a little bit. And Bailey Zimmerman is like absolutely dead center country radio artist, but I don't think in any way, I think would have been stuck in like label development hell for 5 to 10 years had he gone the normal route. Does that mean country music is evolving? I don't actually really think it means that it's evolving. If you look at the relative success of Bailey and Priscilla Block, Bailey is a young, handsome guy writing relatively conventional, or singing, I'm not sure how much writing he's doing, relatively conventional records that make a lot of sense in like a post-Luke Combs ecosystem. And the question referring to 90s throwbacks, obviously you think about Luke Combs basically doing just like power country from the mid-90s. And Zach Bryan doesn't get any country radio airplay at all. So it's like, I don't even know if you can make the case that he's changing what's happening in country music, because I think country is largely looking at him and being like, we're not sure if we want a part of him.
Yeah, and I think the lack of a Best New Artist nomination at the Grammys speaks a lot.
Do you think that was an absolute pointed like shiv from the country music representatives on that committee or whatever?
I think if Zach was playing ball with Nashville and Nashville was supporting Zach Bryan, that Zach Bryan would 1,000% be nominated for Best New Artist. But I think that relationship I can't speak to, other than what I read in your piece, whose decision that is. But I think that the relationship between Nashville as an industry and Zach Bryan is not perfect at the moment.
Zach Bryan, really a good presence on Twitter. I don't know if you guys follow him on Twitter. He's very funny on Twitter. And he tweeted something the other day where he's like, it's crazy how like just being Target and some random guy would be like, hey, bro, you're not country. And I'll be like, yeah, bro, I know. It's crazy.
Zach Bryan getting tested in Target, getting G-checked.
Yo, he's getting pressed. Yo, but also at the same time, Zach Bryan being like, yo, pull up. Like he's dropping
Right,
location.
Right.
Yeah, I be at Target. What about it? What about it? Come check me.
Amazing. I love that.
Shout out to that person who pressed Zach Bryan at Target for getting what he deserved. Another light country question, and I think we will talk more about this in a little while on Popcast, but this is from Inelda Butler. And Inelda has a question about Wallen. Inelda says, is the re-embrace of Morgan Wallen by the country music establishment and the fans a reaction to the artists who are trying to push country music forward? I'm also thinking of the dust-up between Maren Morris and Brittany Aldean this year.
Ooh, that was fire. What a
And
great
how
piece.
Maren considered not attending the CMAs because of it. Did Maren skip the CMAs?
No, she attended, but I think that she conveniently left when Jason Aldean and his wife arrived.
I handle a lot of parties like that. Let's just keep it a buck. So low key, I respect that move. The Insurrection Barbie tweet is the best thing she's done this year. And I do really like her latest album. For all the talk of country music being a family, it quote unquote, it seems really easy to become ostracized from it. It's interesting to see who gets welcomed back. It seems now that there's a path into country without having the full support of the establishment that some people like Casey who abandoned the genre. But can there actually be more diversity in the genre if everyone who's slightly different just leaves? And then goes on to talk about Mickey Guyton, Chapel Hart, etc. Morgan Wallen is back and has been back and maybe never was not back. It's important to say that. How we talk about Wallen, I think, is going to evolve this year, if only just because I think people are going to start having to talk about Wallen. And this is something that we've done in bits and pieces. When I went to those Wallen shows, it was because you have to acknowledge that this person is, whether you like him or not, one of the biggest forces in commercial popular music right now and is still selling out arenas, whether or not you talk nice about him on Twitter. And we can talk about the problems and we can talk about the issues, but ignoring it is not the solution. And I think that's going to become harder to do.
Yeah, this week he just spent his 100th week in the top 10 of the Billboard 200.
And brought Let's Go Brandon chants to Madison Square Garden in the year 2022. You know, not that he led them, but his fans were there chanting. You cannot ignore an artist as big as Morgan Wallen.
The question becomes, is there such a thing as a way to restore Morgan Wallen in a way that pleases everybody? I don't think that there will be. I think probably the biggest itch for me is I'm not sure anybody in Nashville is even asking this question. Like everybody in Nashville, I think by and large, is just like, can he just come back? Are we just?
Yeah, they're like, the storm is over.
And I think that there are people who have extremely valid reasons to be skeptical, not just of Wallen, but also of the people who are pushing to have Wallen return to the center or who are down to acknowledge. But I don't think that ignoring Wallen is going to be an option, because I just don't think of all the industries that scene is not invested in any way in any of the real questions that his infraction bring up. I think to the question of whether people who are different just leave the genre, I guess it's really a question of where are you drawing your boundaries of the genre, right? Like you mentioned Casey. Casey has a great career. I don't suspect Casey is even slightly stressed about whether she gets mainstream Nashville play. Maren maybe relies on it a tiny bit more, but as we've talked about on Popcast, any country play that she gets is a blessing because she's really just an R&B singer. So
also, she's a woman. You know how that
true.
works.
So a double blessing.
But I want to go back to the part of the question about whether basically continued support for Wallen is in some sense like a reactionary position and just merely to own the libs. I think there was probably like a little bit of that at first, but I think the longevity that Caryn is speaking to and John that you're speaking to and the on the ground support that we've seen where people are putting their money in Morgan Wallen's pocket actively, I think ultimately people just don't care that much about people's extra musical infractions, whether you're talking about Kodak Black or you're talking about Morgan Wallen. He has songs that people want to listen to, they want to see performed, and he has a lot of them. And the radio obviously makes that possible by playing them a lot so that they then are, in people's heads, but his streaming numbers have never really dipped. If anything, they've risen. People want to hear Morgan Wallen's music, and what he did is not enough to turn them off of that.
Also, it's important to remember, and again, not to get too in the weeds, because I think we are going to come back to this topic. If we think about white performers who have had that particular infraction, Morgan Wallen is not alone.
A racial slur.
Morgan Wallen is not alone.
No, and we're talking about some of the biggest artists of all time.
I mean, we're literally
Eminem, Justin Bieber,
John Mayer people,
Post Malone.
It's like, if we're going to have that conversation has to be a far wider umbrella if we're going to have that conversation. Do I think that Nashville is particularly ill-equipped to have even the smallest version of this conversation? Yeah, absolutely, unequivocally. They're ill-equipped, and I just don't think that there's an appetite. This idea of country music as a family, that's marketing. And also Nashville is like truly a company town where like publicists and managers and touring manager, like everybody works with and for everybody else. Extremely cloistered. Everybody's on the boards of the CMAs and the voting committees. Everybody is collectively invested in the success of everybody else. And no one wants to knock one of the pillars out. You can say that that is a politically or socially unwise or unsavvy choice, but it is still a choice that people make unwise and unsavvy choices literally every day. I don't think that people will have to leave the genre. I think the question really becomes, do you want to show up every day and fight? And I think, you see some of that fatigue when you see conversations with like Mickey Guyton and other Black artists, the notion of like, why are we the only ones fighting? And then obviously even Maren Moore is showing up and kind of like coming with, Maren Moore is with the you know what I mean? Like Maren Moore is like,
yeah, she loves it and she's good
she
at
like
it.
wants the smoke, like 100%. But like, do you want that smoke every day? Like, probably not. So again, I think we'll get into it more, but I do think the question is less maybe about the specifics of the Wallen case and more about the notion of family and boundaries. And also, like, if we're talking about family, how many other people have had how many other kinds of infractions and are still like welcomed into the family? That's like a big question that I think was worth addressing. Okay. Jamie Asfaw Cooper has kind of like a wild take, and I'm into it. Jamie says, recently started listening to the podcast and enjoying your backlog. And that is often how I think of it, as a backlog. I started listening to Ethel Cain after you mentioned her on the live show recently. Hey, and she drove me crazy for a week because I could not place the influence I was hearing. I read everything I could find on the internet about Ethel Cain's influences. Is there a lot on the internet about Ethel Cain's influence? Good news to me. But I knew it wasn't Lana Del Rey. Okay, fine, whatever. Or Florence or Hozier.
She loves Hozier.
She talked about it?
Yeah, she loves Hozier.
Okay.
Yeah.
Finally, I resorted to scrolling through every single album I've ever saved on Spotify. Jamie,
Wow.
we're with you.
We love you.
Yeah, we support all of this. And I gasped when I got to SZA's Z. I'm re-listening to it now, and this sound is all over Preacher's Daughter, especially songs like Green Mile, Omega, and Shattered Ring. Even the texture of Cain's voice and the cadence of the lyrics reminds me of SZA on Z.
More of a comment than a question, but we'll take it.
Does this resonate for anybody?
I will say that Ethel Cain has been enjoying the new SZA album and posting about it a lot on social media. I do not know her connection to the last SZA album, but Jamie, because you scrolled through every album you've ever saved on Spotify, I will ask her for you and I will let you know.
Wow. Big link. I can't wait. We may have unearthed something. Jamie, you may have changed the narrative.
I buy. I'll say that.
Yeah. I'm soft buy on that. Stephen Lurie says, medium time listener. Thanks.
Good neg. All right.
Yeah. Oh, I got another great neg coming up after this. First time emailer. I want to stuff the mailbag a question about music videos, particularly if they have been murdered and who or what is responsible for their demise. With the exception of Rosalia, 7 videos off the new album, and Renaissance, there's no real Renaissance videos. There's 2 from Taylor, 3 from Harry. Does anyone even remember the purchase of OK Go or Gangnam Style? Are we living in a time beyond the importance of music videos? And if so, what? Let us hear. TikTok and Instagram grassroots music video demand. I mean, that's the obvious answer, is that if you can have 1,000 user-generated music videos made at no cost to you, why would you ever spend like $1 million making a video of your own? And what can be done in a music video that hasn't actually already just been done already? The range of available shocking options is probably lower than ever, I would imagine. That's what this feels like to me.
High budget music videos, dead, replaced by TikTok, no longer a good investment. Low budget music videos, thriving. If you care about regional rap music, YouTube remains the best streaming service.
100%.
The stuff that people are doing with iPhones in their neighborhoods, the dances, the mobbing.
You want to talk about like the streaming world being saturated and there's too much to get through. Video is too much to get through. And video demands such a level of attention and care to watch and consume. So it's even harder than ever.
What's the best high budget music video of this year?
I genuinely couldn't tell you. Churchill Downs?
No idea.
Is there a video for Churchill Downs? Oh, where they're at the horse
filmed
race.
at the Derby. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good video. I want to Google it because I think this is an interesting question, and I did not have a lot of experience with major music videos this year.
And to be really honest, I often don't even know if major songs have music videos.
You know who put out good videos this year at a high budget level? Kendrick Lamar. The Heart Part 5, great video. N95, great video. Young Lean, Bliss with FKA Twigs, great video. Let's see what else is on this list. Babytron, a million good videos. Number 13 on this list is Cash In, Cash Out, Pharrell and 21 Savage. Never seen it.
Wait, which list are you looking at?
I'm looking at Rate Your Music's top videos of 2022. Number 1, just for the record, is a Black Midi song.
Shout out JP.
Number 2 is Joji, Glimpse of Us. That was on your song list, right?
That was, but that video is like literally him curled up on a mattress in like a squat, like filmed on a iPhone 2. You know?
Yeah. All right. The number 7 music video on the top videos of ratemymusic.com is in fact my favorite music video and one of my favorite songs of the year. Playboi Carti and A$AP Rocky, Our Destiny, co-starring Beck. You've never seen this video?
Nope.
This only exists on Instagram, has been ripped on YouTube. Amazing song, Destiny's Child sample, unclearable, apparently. But it's low budget, probably handheld camcorder footage of Playboi Carti and A$AP Rocky hanging out seemingly in the back of a taxi in Europe with Beck.
Maybe this is actually a good story for us to do at some point, like identifying the last people still committing $500,000 to music videos, like real, like end time start. All right, we'll take it under advisement. We're coming to the end here. Max Page just says, no question, actually. Just wanted to say JP is the man. Long live JP.
True,
Yes.
true.
Like 100%, the existence of JP nullifies the need for my existence. So like absolutely correct.
The Daily Miracle. It's JP.
Maybe he's the person who got that Black Midi video. It's in the number 1 spot. Sean Prislak wants to know, does it matter if Cardi B is too busy being Cardi B to ever release another album?
Doesn't matter to me.
No, it doesn't matter to me either, but I think she will.
I think she will too, but literally doesn't matter to me. Like doing the Glorilla song and the K-Flock song for my number 1 on the songs list is just like, that's all I need from, like, if Cardi does 5 to 10 things like that a year, she'll be famous for 50 years.
Plus her social media, since it's not just the songs, right?
But the songs help because like they keep her on radio. Like a Cardi B verse on that Glorilla record turns it into a much bigger event. Okay, the last question. Now, look, we got a lot of questions. We're going to do dedicated episodes on a couple of these topics. We got so many questions about K-pop and why we don't do K-pop episodes more. And people asking about the Hybe girls this year, New Jeans and LE SSERAFIM. We will get into a K-pop girl group episode, and especially the kind of collapse of Blackpink. Sorry, don't come for me. We will get into that. Also, Afrobeats and a bunch of questions I was really happy to see about trap corridos tumbados, Nathaniel Cano, Fuerza Regida, Junior H, so on and so forth, and the kind of youth wave in like post-regional Mexican music. We definitely want to do an episode about that. So for all the people who ask those questions, yes, very much on my mind, 100%. The last question kind of touches on this, and I think could borrow parts from a lot of this. Is also Afrobeats questions and so on and so forth. Feel and Tembo says, very simply, just wanted to hear, what do you think musical trends will be for 2023? there's some unexpected turns, but which genres or artists do you anticipate will having their moment in the sun in 2023? And Theo is writing from South Africa. And I think the obvious question sitting in that chair is Amapiano and the way that that is going to trickle, I think, into European pop and possibly back into American R&B. One of the real striking things that's happened with Afrobeats in the last 2 or 3 years, I think it's replaced roots-oriented reggae in a lot of like hip hop and R&B radio station rotation and creeping into pop radio playlists. Whereas you used to think every year, like there's going to be 1 or 2 big Jamaican records that are going to end up being staples, like, you know, a Charlie Black record, a Wayne Wonder record, or whatever. Increasingly, that's just a Thames record or a WizKid record. But because technology is so much better, collaboration is so much wider, people are so much more open-eared, the speed with which those sounds are kind of like coming into other pop scenes is so fast. And so I think you will see increasing presence of Afrobeats in a lot of artists who probably you're not going to want to hear Afrobeats records from, you know, like
right, which has been teased in past years, right?
Yeah, like you're definitely going to get like a Dua Lipa Afrobeats record. You're going to get a Selena Gomez Afrobeats record if that doesn't exist already.
No, didn't she hop on that one song that JP put on his songs list?
She did.
Oh, man.
It has
totally
already
right.
happened. Yep.
I learned about this on Popcast, in fact.
Okay, you're going to get a bunch of records like that are going to make you cringe a little bit, I think. But I do think like with the Afrobeats records and the Amapiano records, like the smoothness of it and how the smoothness of it is going to help facilitate its wider ascent and like adoption. And it does feel like it's set up for that this year.
I got one that I sort of came up with
Indie rock?
during that question. Yeah, indie rock. No. Relationship rap.
Okay, fine. I'll bite.
All right. I think the sort of peaking of drill, nihilism, and violence combined with the RICO charges faced by Young Thug, the use of their lyrics in the indictment, combined with the success of SZA, Cardi B, combined with someone like CEO Trail, who's doing a lot of really intimate stuff I haven't heard since like Ghostface about like the ins and outs of a relationship, like rap breakup songs, plus like Rod Wave. I feel like there's enough in the universe that I'm trying to will this to happen, but I think men in their feelings in rap.
I would point out that's been a quiet presence for many, many years.
I agree, but even the guy you're talking about doesn't really do that much anymore.
Wow.
You mean Slug from Atmosphere? That's who you're referring to? Slug from Atmosphere is off that wave? I'm sorry. I didn't realize. Hello to Slug. Hello.
Yeah, Mr. Graham is on demon time. He is not here for a relationship, as we heard on Her Loss, as we've seen with the 42 diamond necklace.
The Missoni room calls.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think street rap about relationships. I'm just calling it right now. Let's see what happens.
Okay. Karen, indie rock?
It'll probably be the same as it was this year, where there's a lot of records and maybe we don't care about all of them. I have no other grand predictions, but yours were interesting.
That is the conclusion of part 2 of the Mailbag episode. What a voyage this has been. Thank you to Karen and Joe. I'm relieved to have you back from vacation and back from illness.
Can I say thank you again, just for the whole year and the whole run, but just specifically for these questions, Popcast listeners, like moving me every day with their levels of insight and curiosity about popular music. It's really like soul affirming. Like
absolutely,
we can get tired of doing this and talking about this stuff, but they keep us going.
That is our show. Listen to every podcast ever, nytimes.com/podcast. Email us podcast@nytimes.com. Subscribe anywhere you get your audio content. That's Google, Apple, Stitcher, etc. Get in the Facebook group, get in the Discord, tinyurl.com/podcast Facebook or /podcast Discord. Buy a t-shirt. We have some left. Not loads, but we do have a few left. More white than black, because apparently black t-shirts are more popular. It's the popcast.myshopify.com. Our producer, also back from illness, Pedro Rosado from Headstepper Media. We appreciate you. And we are grateful for everybody for another incredible year. And we are excited to continue doing this for you and for us, because it's better than a lot of other parts of our job. To Joe's note about the drill reactionaries, you know, a song I really liked this year and didn't write about, but I really did enjoy this year was by a couple rappers who basically flipped the notion of boasting about being heavy in the streets and made an entire song about how they're not heavy in the streets because they know that police are watching. And in an era in which rap lyrics are being used at trial, like literally today as we're talking, and that is a hot topic of conversation, it is a clever inversion and a way to avoid potentially this specific problem. So let's go out with a little bit of I'm Cappin', and this is Monster and Big Flock.
Nah, I ain't got no bags, ain't got no drink, I ain't got no money. Bro, I'm said I got Zarbax for a low number, but I ain't gonna lie, man, it was a joke. Ain't smoking no more dick. Tell my J, man, I lied, this is regular smoke. I ain't no kingpin, no drug lord, only cross that I sold with some cinnamon toast.
I don't do none of that, I be rapping, I just be capping, I just be rapping. I don't want smoke with a soul, I ain't in the streets, bitch, I don't get active. For me, I ain't got ops, look, stop, you